Hello and welcome to the latest TPAS Cymru video interview. Today's a really important subject involving tenants in health and safety. And for this, we have Ian Walters, Head of Regulation at the Housing and Regeneration Department of Welsh Government. He's really experienced in housing policy and regeneration. He's currently involved in the thinking and development of how tenant voice sits in the wider subject of housing regulation and conduct. He's worked around social housing for a long time in the public and private sector and has always been a keen supporter of tenant involvement. In fact, many TPAS regulars will recognise him as Ian's taken part in many tenant events over the last couple of years and roundtables. He's a regular at TPAS conference and at a number of our regulation-themed events that TPAS run. So, welcome, Ian. Welcome to our video interview.
Thanks, David.
So the theme of this discussion really is around involving tenants in health and safety. So maybe if I could ask you maybe the first question, which is, how do the regulators get assurance from housing associations about health and safety compliance?
Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's a really good question because obviously, clearly, over the last 6 months or so, things have changed drastically for everybody. And what we did at that point, what I'm going to do is talk about what we've been doing during the COVID period, if you like, because things did change and things happened so differently. We brought in quite quickly temporary arrangements so that RSLs could really concentrate on the challenge of continuing to provide essential services in what is a challenging environment for them and for everybody else. But we still maintained a regulatory focus, but that was on the impact of COVID on how RSLs were operating, primarily around the safety of tenants, which is the subject we're talking about today, safety of tenants and service users, and ongoing financial resilience and viability. We paused our routine regulatory oversight, which is the sort of the day-to-day interaction that we have with organisations. We suspended or paused the judgment publications and the requirement for RSLs to submit lots of returns and information. But we continued with case management where we have cases of concern with different RSLs. The system that we brought in was very, very kind of focused around co-regulation and self-reporting. So RSLs were expected to work with us very, very closely and to tell us, they're obliged to tell us under the temporary system about significant changes in service provision. So when we closed offices, when services were suspended or paused because of access issues or lack of contractors, any significant compliance risks and any difficulties with the financial plan, liquidity, covenant compliance or loan conditions and so on. But we've also kept in touch with RSLs. We have regular catch-ups with all the RSLs talking about issues that they're facing, difficulties, the operating difficulties they might encounter and so on. So the way that we get assurance from RSLs changed completely. So we would have been close to organisations attending board meetings, in very regular contact, talking to different people. We do things in a different way, but then everybody does now. Lots of our interactions are by video like this. Lots of our interactions are, it's just happening in different ways. But we still are requiring assurance about health and safety issues, and we'll go on to that perhaps in a moment.
Yeah. Okay, so and you saw that collaboration from landlords?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The whole system relies on that cooperation, on that co-regulation, we call it, and that shared endeavour to make sure that the sector is operating effectively.
Okay, so what type of evidence then and information do housing associations need to provide to you, especially in relation to health and safety?
Yeah, so one of the things we did do quite quickly into the process, in fact, for the end of April, we introduced what we call a business continuity survey, which all of the larger RSLs have to complete. That's 37. The survey gathers information on the key aspects that we just talked about, so business continuity and finance, as well as tenant health and safety. We
Okay.
published then a summary of the findings of every second survey. We decided that if we published it every month, it would actually get a bit boring and it wouldn't tell a story. So we decided to go every 2 surveys. And we've just this week, I think, we circulated to all of our stakeholders this week the most recent survey report, and I think it publishes this week. It'll be on the website at some point during the week. So it's circulated to all RSLs, so to chief executives, to chairs, and then to all of the stakeholder groups, which includes TPAS. I think you get a copy as a member of the regulatory advisory group, and as I say, it'll publish. So we get performance information, which tells us how each RSL is doing in terms of compliance responsibilities and legal duties when we're talking about health and safety. And that lets us look at trends, which is useful, and also lets us then identify RSLs where performance is different to what I'd call the average, so outliers, if you like. And where we do identify significant outliers, we'll discuss with each individual RSL what the situation is, what the issue is, and agree any action which might be required.
So what examples are those sort of things in those metrics then? What are you tracking in health and safety?
So what we're tracking quite a lot. The big 5, I think people commonly kind of refer to it, but actually becomes a big 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, depends on where you are. But I'll talk about the big 5. So what we look at gas safety, and I'll give you some of the information that we're publishing in terms of how performance is looking. So gas safety, the level of compliance reported across the sector as an average is about 99.5% of properties which need a gas certificate have got a gas certificate. 13 RSLs are reporting compliance levels of 100%, which is an increase from 9 at the end of May. And the number reporting less than 99% compliance has fallen from 4 from 6 in May. So we can see in gas performance is getting better, which is what you would expect, really. I think people will remember back at the beginning of the COVID sort of situation is that a lot of organisations paused their gas servicing, for various reasons, lots to do with difficulties in getting access, difficulties in engaging contractors and so on. But as guidance has emerged, as things have become clearer, then that's all restarted and we can see the performance across the piece. We then collect information, similar information on fire risk assessments, where the average is probably, in fact, reported as being up to date in 94% of properties. Electrical checks, 98.4%. Asbestos surveys, 80%. Water hygiene, 84%. And then we also then collect some information on emergency repairs, and as a whole the sector's reporting over 97% of emergency repairs being completed on time. So there's a lot of detail that sits behind all of that. But what it does show clearly is improvements in compliance in most areas, which is good. And as I said, where we see outliers, then we'll go and talk to the individual RSL about the issues and what they need to do to sort, or what they're doing, what their plans are to sort that out.
When you have talked to some of those landlords, that are outliers, have you seen change and action from them? And I know you can't talk to individuals, but
yeah, I won't talk specifics. But what we have seen is that in most situations, then there's a perfectly legitimate reason why things are as they are at the moment, and there's a perfectly sound plan in what they're doing to improve compliance, to get better performance. Lots of things, as I said, changed over time. So in the early days, there were issues about availability of contractors, and frankly, people were unsure about the measures that they had to take to work in other people's homes. But as guidance has emerged, as less people are self-isolating and shielding, then things are a little bit easier. And as guidance emerged from the Welsh Government and other regulators such as the HSE and trade organisations, all of that helped RSLs to develop safe ways of working in people's homes and maintaining their compliance duties.
So now So regarding back to the tenants then, so how can tenants get more involved with landlord health and safety? What advice and tips would you give them, or what are you looking for from tenants and, I say, landlord health and safety?
In a way, this is kind of, it's always a $1,000,000 question for me, I have to say, in terms of how can tenants be more involved in landlord health and safety. I'm going to go back a little bit, actually, to recommendation 15 of the sector overview on health and safety, which we published a year or so ago, I think the end of 2018. And that says RSL should ensure they have appropriate arrangements in place to encourage tenants to engage with and influence landlord health and safety. At the time of the review, and you might remember reading this, only 6 of 38 RSLs reported a clear route by which tenants could become involved in health and safety or could contribute to landlord health and safety. And that was usually through tenant forums or tenant panels. Now, I think that's pretty poor. Having said that, we didn't specifically ask that question, but only 6 of the organisations responding, volunteered information on the way tenants could contribute. You then remember in July 2019, the Regulatory Board published this review, The Right Stuff, Hearing the Tenant's Voice, and that was looking at evidence that tenants were effectively involved in strategic decision making and shaping services. And we know that's required by Performance Standard 2. Shaping services and strategic decision making, tenant health and safety has to be a component part of that requirement, that performance standard almost. Following the tragic events of Grenfell, we know that listening to and involving tenants became even more relevant, and I think it continues to be so. So following the tragic events of Grenfell, we know that listening to and involving tenants became perhaps even more relevant and continues to be so. RSLs need to involve tenants in health and safety, and that's to meet the requirements of Performance Standard 2. And they really need to be continually reviewing how they do that with their tenants, with their peers, and learning from others of different ways of approaching things. So I think involving tenants and tenants becoming more involved in landlords' health and safety is a real challenge. But actually, one of the outcomes perhaps of the Health and Safety Week that you're holding could be some new ideas for how tenants can become involved.
That's exactly that. I think it's that's what David Lloyd's exactly doing, having those discussions about how we can do this, and how we can learn from each other and best practice. So, that is something we're very much aware of, to try and inspire all the others and those tenants to get involved, because I think we both agree it's an important part of that tenant voice in ensuring we improve the standards of health and safety.
I think absolutely. I think that perhaps one of the outcomes, as I said, of the week will be ideas for tenants to take to their landlords, ideas perhaps for tenants to bring to us as the regulator to talk to us about. But we do need to remember, kind of under our model, what we want as a regulator is to make sure, or to get assurance that landlords at RSLs are listening to what their tenants say and involving their tenants.
Yes.
And that's what we're looking for. But we're always happy to talk and discuss these things. And then the other thing I think it is worth just looking forward to is we always said, and you'll be very aware of this, and most people will, that we're going to review the framework. We set a date, I think summer 2020. Clearly that framework review's been delayed a little bit now, and we're just kind of working through the program to try and decide when the review best takes place. But the important part of this for tenant involvement is that we, or the RBW, have committed to asking a couple of fundamental questions about Performance Standard 2, really, and tenant involvement. So does it need strengthening as a performance standard, is the first question. And then the second question, perhaps more fundamental, is should there be a tenant judgment aspect? So at the moment, as you know, we've got two judgment aspects, which is governance, which includes tenant services, and financial viability. I think the question we'll be asking as part of the review is, should there be a third judgment category for tenant services? What that looks like, we clear, or what that might look like, we've got no idea. But it's an important debate, I think.
I think maybe when we get into those discussions, maybe you'd be willing to come along again, and we can involve some tenants in that discussion. I think it's something that will evolve over the next couple of months. But so go back to the health and safety, though. I mean, you're comfortable at the moment of where the landlords are. The metrics seem to be in the right place. Maybe we need to see some more tenant involvement in that. So anything else you'd like to see maybe in going forward?
I think there's always room for improvement in any metrics, but I think we're in a unique place, if you like, in that the issues that RSL's in carry on delivering their services has been very challenging for everybody. We were kind of, we did our review of health and safety back in, I think it was October 2018. A year or so on, organisations were still coming to us and saying we're still identifying problems, perhaps with our data, perhaps with some of our processes, and so there's always room to improve, always room to learn. And clearly the debate in terms of building safety and all of that is ongoing as well. It's a live debate, and I know that you've got some of my colleagues from the building safety team talking to the set, or having a session a little later, or maybe even earlier, who knows. And so there's lots of aspects of health and safety which is a real live debate, and will always be a very high priority for us as regulator, for the Welsh Government, and for landlords too.
Great. That's good. Thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time. I hope the listeners, have found this interesting. It's part of this is part of our Health and Safety Week. I'd be interested in any comments you want to make down below if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook. And all the comments from the week that we'll be hearing will be putting together as a summary that we will share with people like Welsh Government of what you want to see and what you feel where we are at the moment. So thank you, Ian, for taking part in this video interview. And we'll no doubt see you on camera or in an event soon. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone.